If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done. If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting if you email me directly at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our show, be sure and check out our Patreon, the Opperman Report Patreon. There's a lot of stuff there on Patreon in the free section that's free. We just put up yesterday some bill of particulars in the case of the Joel Greenberg stuff. I got a lot of Joel Greenberg stuff in the for free up there on Patreon, videos of this character. That's he's known as Matt Gaetz's wingman. So all that stuff is up there for free. But we have part 3 up there right now of Ted Rubenstein and Steve Kopesky about Jimmy Hoffa too as well. So check out Patreon. Of course, if you want to get our stuff for free, go to Spreaker.com. I do a live show every Friday night. There's a chat room. You get an email notification when we put up new content, and I play repeats there every single night of the week at Spreaker.com. Got some really good exclusive stuff for you. Today we have Brian A. Beute, and you can find him on LinkedIn as Brian A. Beute, B-E-U-T-E. And Mr. Beute is the man who decided to primary against Joel Greenberg. And Greenberg went nuts all over this guy, making horrible, false allegations about our friend here, Mr. Beute. But he's seen some justice. Greenberg's in prison for quite a long time. And it's also brought about this expose on Matt Gaetz as well. But we're going to hear from the man himself, Mr. Brian A. Beute. Mr. Beute, are you there?
I am here. Thanks for having me, Ed.
Hey, thank you so much. Before we get into this whole thing about Joel Greenberg and Matt Gaetz and all this stuff, tell us about yourself. Who is Brian A. Beute?
Sure. Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I'm a native of Michigan and have lived in Florida for 23 years in the Orlando area. I'm a veteran educator, and I was part of the initiation of a group called Save Rural Seminole, started in 2018, and I served as its inaugural president for a few years. And a group of folks encouraged me to, because of that success and that effort, encouraged me to consider running directly against Joel Greenberg to give the citizens of Seminole County an alternative. I was a lifelong Republican, so that was a Republican primary. And, of course, the rest is history, unfortunately, and I'm thankful that you want to ask some clarifying questions today. But, some folks in the media are incorrect and or are undereducated about, my part in all of this. And so I appreciate your time today.
Oh, yeah, man. People just, they drive by. They just want to see the headlines, Quick question, though. Save Rural Seminole. Now, that's like a conservation group. You don't see many Republicans involved in, ecology and conservation.
Well, I grew up in West Michigan, and, Michigan at one time was the majority of Michigan is really a conservative area, and conservation efforts in Michigan were always led by conservatives, Republicans. It's a Bible Belt region of the country. And so it's just part of how I grew up. I grew up outside, enjoying the outdoors. And I think, unfortunately, that term conservation is maybe been, hijacked. I'm not sure by whom. I don't know, all the history, but I think Teddy Roosevelt was quite the Republican, and he was quite the conservation and author of a lot of our parks. So, I'm not sure how that all ended up, but it's just part of who I am. So, and I joined an effort. It wasn't just my effort. It was an effort of a group of like-minded people who crossed across the political spectrum.
And why did you choose the office of tax collector? What made you want to run for that office?
Well, again, I think it was an offshoot of my efforts as president, leading that group and convincing the Board of County Commissioners to vote no against a large-scale development that was being proposed for our region of Seminole County. And I just think that folks noticed that I wasn't afraid to, take on controversy. And, obviously I studied the issues. Joel Greenberg obviously was the tax collector for a few years. He had been in the news a lot for, behaviors that really seemed naturally unbecoming of an elected representative. And but why tax collector? And it really ultimately came down to I looked at the job and it seemed something I could do, and I could do it with integrity. And I thought that my candidacy would be a clear alternative to Joel Greenberg's tenure as the tax collector.
For people not familiar with Florida, the tax collector's office is also the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, where you get your license and you register your car. Like they're upfront about it that it's all a tax. They're not hiding anything. It's a tax in every state, but here they call it a tax. But Greenberg was doing some odd stuff to begin with before his insane behavior with you. Like he was carrying a gun and stuff like that, and badges, and investigating Bitcoin, a lot of crazy stuff, right?
Yeah, and so just like regular citizens, I noticed those articles and reporting in the news, but I'll admit, like, I didn't pay much attention to it. I was a teacher, a dad, busy living life, loving my neighbors, going to church, save rural Seminole. So it wasn't really something that I focused on, and so I do have a lot of empathy for the general public. I paid attention to national news, and that's just, I think we've been trained to do that. And when you run for public office, you really quickly start to realize that all politics really is local, and it's not national. Yes, there are implications of who we vote for as our representatives and president and vice president, and obviously we're seeing that now. We're going to see a brand new cabinet being installed next month. So, but, people have, I think, decided to insulate themselves. And as a result, they're not paying attention to what's happening, in their small municipalities or their counties. And so, I'll admit, I wasn't really paying attention to Joel Greenberg other than hearing and seeing some of the headlines in the news.
And this is your first little baby step into politics, right? So you didn't have a whole organization behind you or anything, right? A team?
No. I think I raised maybe $20,000, and at that time Joel was saying that he had, $500,000 in his coffer, and so no, I didn't. And I didn't. I went into it with a great deal of naivety. I'll admit that.
And no opposition research on Greenberg?
No, I mean, what's opposition research, right? I did my own research, and he frankly provided the enough evidence of his character. Right, Google, yeah.
I heard Google is
I couldn't have afforded to do that.
Yeah, right. Okay, so then what happens? What was your first hint that things were that you were in big trouble with this bunch?
Well, you're referring to prior to my running and filing, or are you talking about after filing?
Yeah, I mean, when did you realize, hey, these guys are playing very serious, and then they're willing to break the law, and they're coming after me.
Well, I went into this naively. I knew that there were unsavory behaviors going on in that office. I knew, I think an article came out October 4th, 2019, written by Lauren Ritchie in the Orlando Sentinel. And the title was, it caught my and several other friends' attention, and something like, $3.5 million given to, friends. And so, she had done, at that point, probably the most exhaustive research and made that publicly available in that article, and just listed, at least a dozen individuals who, according to her research, were receiving either ridiculous salaries above and beyond what would be maybe standard, or frankly, fraudulent contracts. So that caught my attention, and since that afternoon, I filed October 4th, 2019.
And just think, if he hadn't stalked you, he'd probably be still in that office doing that same stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's hard to say. I know we're probably getting a little ahead of ourselves here in the timeline, but it's hard to say. He was already on the Fed's radar, according to the testimony of many. I've read a lot of depositions, so he was under investigation, I guess, early in 2019.
Okay, so then what happened? What caused him to what was the nature of him stalking you?
So on October, the 18th, I had filed 2 weeks prior, I was summoned to the headmaster's office at my school, and I was told the unfortunate news that the school had received 9 identical anonymous letters claiming that I had raped a boy. And the letter was, you can find it sort of obscurely on the internet, but it was written from the perspective of a child, saying that I had raped his friend, and that he was reporting it to the school anonymously. And had even created a couple of fake names, putting them in quotes. So, and the envelope was handwritten. So that's where it started, and then.
And we should say that all of this has been investigated. This isn't a shadow of a doubt that any of this really happened. Greenberg was convicted for this, for lying about this man. Yeah? So that there's no he said, right, she said, or he's denying. This never happened. Okay, 100%. So we can say that 100%.
Right. This isn't conjecture.
These are false charges.
Yeah. Right, and so I was under investigation for a period of time. One of the claims in the media is that the school put me on administrative leave. Technically, I asked the school to put me on administrative leave, and I did that because it was self-preservation. I'm running for public office. I'm really ultimately the one who, kind of put the school in that position. So, and I knew enough about, administrative strategies and protocol to know that it would probably be best if I offered rather than them asking me. So after being told this and a few tears, I looked at my boss and said, I think I'd like to ask to be placed on leave. And they granted it to me, right away. They knew the severity of it. And I don't think that the school ever once thought that this was real, that it was true. I think it was fairly well known in the community that I was running for public office by then. And the school had already dealt with an email early in 2019 from a so-called local journalist who he sent an email to my headmaster asking basically if he knew that he had a racist as an employee. And that was all associated with my work as the president of Seminole Sentinel. So this really ultimately started when I was part of a group that was opposed to this large-scale development project.
So, like, did you immediately suspect it was because of your political ambitions, or maybe a ex?
It seemed pretty clear to me,
Yeah.
and my bosses that was associated. That obviously the two were correlated. So, but it was already in the hands of the Seminole County Sheriff's Office. So I had to wait a couple of weeks while I was cleared. I think I was likely cleared very quickly, but I think the sheriff's office, to their credit, I think that they wanted to keep everything sealed as much as possible. Even I think it's probably a law enforcement strategy to keep it sealed from the victims. So I learned, I think it was a couple of weeks later, that ultimately I was cleared. But during that time, my attorney provided a lot of circumstantial evidence on who might have caused that crime, and I believed, and I know that Dave Baer believed it was a crime. It was false reporting, really, ultimately. So and of course, as we now know, I didn't learn the identity. The public didn't learn the identity of the perpetrator until June 23rd of 2020. So, I went pretty much 8 months without sort of justice, I guess you'd say.
Wow.
So.
Okay, and then how did before we, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. Have you ever gone after them civilly?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Have you ever gone after them civilly for monetary damages?
No, I don't care to talk about that.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry. Okay, so then how did the cops trace it back to Greenberg?
So at some point, and I've recently read a press release by the Seminole County Sheriff's Office because they were pressed by local media regarding Matt Gaetz to see if Matt Gaetz could be charged here locally. And the Seminole County Sheriff's Office finally revealed publicly that I'm sorry, I just went down a rabbit trail. What was your question again, Ed?
How did the police trace it back to Greenberg?
Well, again, I haven't seen the evidence, but apparently his DNA was on the letters, and his fingerprints were found on the letters. And but I haven't personally seen that. That's just what I'm reading in the documents, like anybody else. So, and I know we'll probably eventually get into my concern about the co-conspirator.
So there wasn't a signed confession to he leaves his fingerprints and his DNA on the crime there, and a little popcorn trail back to his house. Wasn't there? He created some fake websites too, right? Or Instagram pages or something like that, and they traced those too as well.
Yeah, I appreciate the question because again, my answer is going to clarify, what actually did happen because I'm reading all these crazy, descriptions of what Joel Greenberg did. So, yes, the IP address that went back to his home is related to him starting a Twitter account in my likeness. So it was Brian Beute, and it had my picture. It had, a heading that was something that was stolen from my campaign. So it appeared that it was me, and it was me supposedly making claims about, being white America's preferred over, the alternative, and think just the theme was racial in nature. And then he caused, that's the word that the government uses, he caused a Facebook page to be created, and it was not, unlike a media report recently said it was called Creepy Brian Beute. It wasn't. It was actually named Trinity Teach. And it was a fake Facebook page, and it was created from the perspective of a colleague who was stating that the school was covering up my years of sexual crimes. And obviously that was false as well.
Yeah, you can go back on the Opperman Report Patreon and see the videos of Mr. Greenberg when the police were having a standoff, an armed standoff in front of his house in the middle of the night. And he's talking about being dope sick and he doesn't want to, and then there's another one where he's at his ex-wife's parents' house and you see him there too. So obviously this guy has a lot of personal demons going on that would cause him to come up with this crazy plan, which is so amateurish and on every level, just amazing. So,
well, the judge said it was the most evil thing that he did.
Out of all the other stuff, really.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who's in prison for sex trafficking right now, and financial crimes.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so then what happens? And he gets arrested. What's next?
He was arrested on Tuesday, the 23rd of June in 2020, and he was released on his own reconnaissance. I can't recall if there was a financial bond. I don't know all the details of that. I wasn't paying attention to that. So, and at that point, I'm running a race still.
Oh, really?
And a primary, right? I'm running a primary, right? In other words, I didn't drop the race. I mean, I think a lot of people might have done that, and I had plenty of reason to do that. The paranoia, the stress that it caused, not just for me, but obviously my family. I've, at the time, 2 teenage daughters. I have to explain all of this to them, and it's, it played on me just a real mental toll. And I don't know victim theory. I'm not a psychologist, but at some point you start to maybe believe, oddly enough, that you're guilty of something. Or that you get to that point because you don't think that the perpetrator will ever be arrested, right? So that all was going on in my head, but I've got to run a race, and it was difficult because I was really I was gagged. I mean, it really never was told that I couldn't talk about anything, but it was an ongoing investigation, and there was still an unindicted co-conspirator at large. Even to this day, it's still at large. And so, it really caused, it caused me problems when being interviewed. There were a couple of times that there was a debate and I had, I didn't join the debate. So that would cause, obviously voters, especially super voters, concern, like, oh, how come this guy is not here? Mm-hmm. So it just really messed with my head, and I didn't know how to dodge. Again, I'm just not an attorney, and I'm just a regular guy. I didn't really know how to dodge particular questions. I was concerned that maybe there'd be more happening. So I didn't necessarily hide, but I just had to walk through that wisely, and now I feel like I can talk very openly about it. I assume that the case is closed, even if there's a co-conspirator at large. Maybe I shouldn't assume that, but I mean, we're 5 years now along in the tooth. So anyway, primary happened. I lost in a 3-way race in the primary to the current tax collector. And interestingly and sadly enough, Joel Greenberg received 12% of the vote.
Wow. Okay, so now how much time did Greenberg get?
So I think it was 11 years total after the plea bargain, and I believe he is scheduled to be released in 2030, in the middle of 2030.
Gotcha. And give us an idea of what the charges are that he pled guilty to.
Me personally?
Oh no!
Or all the charges.
Yeah, whatever you know.
Yeah, right. Well, obviously, what had happened to me. He had stolen a lot of money from the county coffer, which oddly enough he was allowed to do that. But that's maybe another topic we could talk about. How it ever got to that point. Obviously, the sex trafficking he admitted to, the SBA loan fraud, which caught up a few, 2 or 3 other people. I know one of those individuals is actually in federal prison as well. There was, 12 people were indicted ultimately. and I think 5 will have served a prison term, and I do believe there's a few that were on probation, and I do know that one person is actually deceased now. So it's as a result of running against a guy that the state should have actually more effectively managed. He was a state employee, but as a result of my running, it really opened up everything. And I don't know all the facts. There's a lot of facts I don't know. There's a lot of facts I don't really care to know either, admittedly, because, like any victim would like to just simply, move on and rebuild his or her life. But, that's what he was charged with. I went to the May 17th, 2021 plea hearing, and then I went to the sentencing on December 1st, 2022 or 2021. It's crazy. We're in 2025 almost here.
Yeah, right. Next week. Yeah. Now, what about they name a co-conspirator, but they don't give you the name of the co-conspirator. So he had help doing this, right? Why don't you give us some background on that?
Sure. He did have help, and so if anyone is interested in looking, I hope someone is actually interested in looking at documents 37 and 38 in the USA versus Joel Greenberg docket. Both of those documents refer to a co-conspirator that is identified 15 times in the original search warrant, which, of course, would have been issued, prior to his arrest on the 23rd of June, 2020. And the co-conspirator's name is listed on that search warrant 15 times. So, my ultimate question is that a mistake that person hasn't been identified in document 4? I mean, document 4 is missing, or is the DOJ, purposely restricting that document from becoming public? And why? Why after 4 years? And, how did that person contribute to crimes committed against me? If you read the original arrest warrant, not the arrest warrant, but the indictment,
okay.
It states the word cause, that Joel Greenberg caused. What does caused mean? Does caused mean that he did it? He licked the envelopes, his fingerprints are on the letters, the IP address goes to his home. That's the definition. Those are actions. He did it all. But there's a co-conspirator. So could caused mean that he did something that the co-conspirator suggested he do? Or did he send the letters in the mailbox? What did the co-conspirator actually do? And it's 4 or 5 years later. Why do we not know that?
Yeah, clearly there's another human being. Yeah, there's another human being involved in this. And Florida is the sunshine law state where all of this stuff is supposed to be available. I've been involved in cases down here before I lived here as a witness where my communications with the prosecutor's office, the defendant was getting our emails, copies of our emails, me talking to the prosecutor while the case was going on. So this stuff is out there. You can get this stuff. So someone's pulling some big strings here, or like you said, they're still under investigation. Someone's still under investigation. We got to look into this, see what's going on here.
Well, Ed, maybe based upon your experience, you could share with your audience, what's the purpose in protecting the identity of a co-conspirator, right? Is it because that person cooperated?
That could be one issue, yeah. Or they're still under investigation, or someone's got a lot of money. You know what I mean? But usually too, like the Miami Herald, they're good at this. They go to court and they get this stuff unsealed. They do it all the time. Why don't they do it in this case?
I don't know. No one's asked. I haven't. Nothing's been filed. I see all kinds. You're right. Miami Herald is super interested. The Orlando Sentinel will file. I think they even just filed recently a joinder to Miami Herald to get some information from another case, an adjacent case. So, why? Why not this case? I don't get it.
Now, and speaking of all this, we just had a big ethics investigation in the House of Congress there. Did they contact you for any information?
No.
Again.
Not sure why that is. Maybe they. I wonder too. Like, do they protect victims? Well, the girls were victims, right? So that's clearly not the case. But I'm only assuming that Matt Gaetz is, not the co-conspirator. That's my only assumption, that he was not involved at all in causing these letters or these social media pages to be created. But it could be any one of probably 4 people, and so yeah, I wasn't asked.
So you have about 4 people in mind. Would you like to give us what your theory is on these 4 people?
Yeah, I believe, after having been subjected to this and watching all of the adjacent cases, that the co-conspirator, because there are a couple of videos that were created the week before Joel Greenberg was arrested, and they were mentioning this is Jacob Engels. It's on the record. It's in the news. I think a couple of reporters even provided the videos and reported on Jacob Engels' involvement and behavior adjacent to Joel Greenberg. It's probably him. He has his own civil matter ongoing right now. It's been ongoing for 2 years. So, it's possible. Gaetz spent a ton of time in Seminole County, as I have stated. It's odd, 1,200 miles away from his workplace, 400 miles away from where he lives, in Niceville. And, he was endorsing Joel Greenberg to run against Stephanie Murphy. That video is also available. And he also gave Joel Greenberg $1,000 to run his reelection. So, I'm not claiming that any of these people did it. It could have been retribution, also based upon my involvement in opposition to this large development. So, it could be the same person who claimed that Ted Cruz had, an affair with 16 women back in 2016. I mean, it's the same nature. The accusation is similar. Did Joel Greenberg create that narrative that I was raping a boy? Did he create it? I mean, there's certainly, the evidence is clear that his fingerprints and his DNA were on the letters, and that the IP address on the social media pages went to his home. But did he create that idea, or did someone say, here's how you get rid of this guy? Here's what you do, once and for all? I mean, it wasn't like these guys sort of pestered me or said, like sort of childish kindergarten, like, oh, you only have $20,000 in your account. And, no, I mean, this happened within days of my filing. And, I mean, the school received the letters the next week after I filed. I mean, there was no turnaround time whatsoever. So, I'd like to know who the co-conspirator is, and it seems like I would think that the media would want to know who the co-conspirator is. And hey, if it's not any of these 4 people, great, let's find out who it is.
You sent me that video of Jacob Engels, and you're right, he's making similar allegations. And those similar allegations were before the letters were received?
So Jacob Engels created those 2 videos on the 15th of June and the 20th of June, and Joel Greenberg was arrested on the 23rd of June.
Gotcha. And what is this guy, Jacob Engels? What's his background? I've never heard of him before.
I didn't until I got involved with Favorable Seminole. I didn't know who the guy was, but he pestered our group. He was supportive of the development project known as River Cross. He wrote on his Central Florida Post page, which is still available to the public. He wrote accommodating articles about the proposed project that benefits. He wrote about Joel Greenberg and his reelection and the positive benefits of him being reelected. So, does a person, he claimed that he was a journalist. I don't know who's paying him. He works for himself. So is he really a journalist ultimately, or is he, hired by politicians? And in his civil case, I think it's fairly clear that there's evidence that he is hired to write articles.
And also, too, you sent me a whole bunch of pictures. And Enrique Terrio from the Proud Boys is in some of these pictures. And so he's mixed in with that bunch, too, as well.
Yes. In Roger Stone's case in, I think it was the Washington Federal District, Amy Berman Jackson was the judge. I can't remember what he was, indicted for, but he admitted, it's in the documents, that Jacob Engels and Enrique Terrio had access to his social media pages. I mean, this is in the public documents. I'm not making any of this up. So Jacob was, I don't know if he was self-proclaimed Roger Stone mini-me, or if Roger Stone calls him that. I don't know. But he's very close. He was there in Washington, D.C., I believe, on the 5th and maybe 6th of January with Roger Stone and others. So, I mean, the record's there out in the public domain if people want to see, that connection there. And, why is Jacob Engels spending so much time in Seminole County? Why had he been making that his home? It's the same suspicion I have for Matt Gaetz. Why did he spend so much time with Joel Greenberg, yet wants to separate himself, conveniently wants to separate himself from Joel Greenberg? It just doesn't add up.
And it's funny, you mentioned before that the $1,000 campaign contribution, but there was a lot of cash going back and forth between those two characters. If you look at their Venmo account, there was tens and tens of thousands of dollars with that bunch. Now, you also wanted to correct the false narrative of people comparing the allegations against Gaetz and the allegations against you.
Right. So when it was announced that Matt Gaetz was nominated for Attorney General, Molly Hemingway came out with a piece. I can't remember the title, and a Twitter character by the name of Village Crazy Lady. They both came out with articles or blogs defending Gaetz and with the attempt to, obviously separate or scapegoat Joel Greenberg. And don't get me wrong, I mean, Joel Greenberg is a criminal, right? He's paying the price for what he did. But now there's this effort to separate Joel and Matt Gaetz, and they were frankly inseparable for a long period of time in Seminole County, in the Bahamas, on a fishing trip, in Washington, D.C. So, Hemingway doesn't address that. Village Crazy Lady doesn't really address that. And these narratives were picked up by Glenn Beck, Charlie Kirk, Candace Owens, Jimmy Dorey. But, I take great umbrage in that overall narrative, but in particular, this Village Crazy Lady, she said that Greenberg called me a carpetbagger. And I asked her, could you provide to me that source? Because I know that never happened. And no, nothing, silent. So I've asked her 3 times if she would provide that source. Now, that might to your audience sound like, you're kind of swatting at flies here. But, when you're a victim of a crime being, from the claim is that you've raped a student and a boy, right? You really do care about the public record and about you. I mean, my name is on the internet, and I ought to take the opportunity to defend myself. So I was never called a carpetbagger. And then she claimed that Joel Greenberg created a Facebook page entitled Creepy Brian Beute. And again, why create these lies? That never happened. She can't provide to me that source. I've asked her a couple of times. And here's what really bothered me ultimately. Candace Owens said of Village Crazy Lady's blog on Twitter, quote unquote, we were able to back check her information is verifiable. And none of these people called me. None of these people asked to verify with me if this is the case. So if you can't believe part of this narrative, I don't think you can believe any of the narrative, and it's highly suspect. The timing's highly suspect. So, I appreciate the opportunity to set that record straight.
I got to tell you something. You can't imagine how many times I'll see one of these Twitter superstars talking about a case that I've worked on. a case that I've worked on, and they're talking about it. And I'll contact them if you can get through to them, right? Hey, that's my case. Do you have any questions for me? I can say what really happened. No, I'm not interested. I got no time for you.
Right.
And the other thing, too, is I really clearly you've been traumatized by this, man. Any victim of crime, it's a trauma. I was once my housekeeper stole some inventory from my house, and that was traumatic. And this is a public trauma, humiliation. Your family, you don't have to make any kind of half steps here in stating your case here, man. It's just outrageous that these people, they're just as much smearing as Greenberg was. There's no difference.
Right. And I think, for a long time, I had a couple of press conferences, and, I'll get asked the questions, the sort of your standard questions, and some people would argue, well, you really never addressed those or answered them directly. And I didn't, because ultimately my candidacy was representative of what is good and decent in human beings. I am not perfect, but I was running against a person that the state should have removed. And, part of my press conferences were requests to Ron DeSantis, to Ashley Moody, to Miguel, to Melinda Miguel, the chief inspector of the state of Florida, to Archer, the 18th judicial state attorney. Why did you let this go for 3 years? Why did it take a regular citizen challenging this guy to open this up, and they'll say, well, the feds were involved by the time we knew it. It's complete bullcrap. Yeah. Even Pam Bondi, who is now conveniently the replacement nominee for United States Attorney General, even she passed up opportunities. She was the Attorney General while Joel Greenberg was the tax collector. And as far as I am aware, Joel Greenberg was not an employee of Seminole County. Joel Greenberg was a constitutional officer who was an employee of the state of Florida. And he had to answer to the Department of Revenue, who answers to, ultimately, Ron DeSantis. And I asked Ron DeSantis, looked in the camera on 2 occasions, and I never once heard from the state of Florida. I even sent email requests to the state of Florida to investigate why Joel Greenberg was allowed to steal, which apparently has come to about $1.8 million. Why was he allowed to get away with that in the state of Florida? Is it because, listen, I was a lifelong Republican until I became an independent. Is it because the state of Florida is run by Republicans? I mean, I was a Republican. I chose to be a Republican partly because of the way I was raised, but also chose it out of my own agency because I'm a conservative. I'm a conservative-minded person. And I can no longer attribute myself to whatever this current Republican Party is. And I think, that basically that's the message I'd like the American people, the average American person to hear is I'm just the average guy. I had a $20,000 campaign account, right? It was, $500 to $500 contributions. And it wasn't, $500 of Bitcoin stolen from the county or provided, by, maybe my parents or, it was just a regular campaign. And my message is this: regular Americans, we deserve better, but I think we have to do something about it. And it's, not creating January 6 events. It's not, putting a dig in at the left. No, get out of your homes, get into the community, go to, local school board meetings, go to a local municipal meeting, run for office. We have to do this. I mean, our nation really is, in a rough situation right now, where the far wings of each party, if you want to call them that, they don't represent the clear majority of Americans. I think the statistics are very clear that 65% of Americans consider themselves independents. And that's because neither party is very appealing anymore. It's led by wild conjecture and odd and crazy behaviors. And I think it's time that regular Americans, stand up and do something. Stop talking about it. Get out of your television. Go to your local meetings. Get involved.
Yeah, it's only going to get worse. The division and the.
Well, I hope not.
And it's hysteria.
I hope a lot of people hear. Yeah, I hope a lot of people hear your show here and are inspired by just a regular person doing it. I'm just a regular person. I have my own struggles, like we all do. But we got to stop worshiping, the former president, the current president, the former AG nominee, the current AG nominee. We've got a problem, an idolatrous problem in our nation, and I'm a believer in capitalism, but I do believe some of this is born out of the kind of freedoms we have. We have the freedom to make terrible decisions. We have the freedom to attack each other and, frankly, get away with it. And sometimes, in my situation, you're not allowed to get away with it, and you'll be prosecuted for it.
You mentioned before about how you complained to the governor, there was no investigation, and even when he violated the terms of his pretrial release by leaving the area he was allowed to on tether, he was at an ankle bracelet, and when the marshals went on the radio to say, hey, we're going to go pick this guy up, the local cops pick it up and says, call me on my cell phone. You know what I mean? Like, they knew right away they were going to get Greenberg, and they were making special arrangements for this guy in the middle of the night to pick him up. I've never seen anything like that before in my life.
Well, in one of the videos, I think it was described as a strategy, one of the deputies was basically patting him on the back verbally, saying, "Man, I'm amazed at what you've done. You've done such great things. Don't make it worse for yourself." Right? So who's to say, those are probably law enforcement strategies, a lot of that, and I think probably Joel's cell phone was probably in the system at that point.
Well, also, too, they were joking around saying, yeah, they caught him on his computer talking to little girls. Now, that's nothing he's ever been charged with. Are you aware of any allegations like that besides that tape?
I've heard it. There's so many documents. I may have read it. I don't recall that specific. That's pretty detailed, so I don't recall that. I don't recall even if he was charged for something like that. So I don't know.
And how about yourself? When these allegations came up about you, did the police seize your cell phones and computers and stuff?
No.
Oh, really?
That's why, back to something. Never. So, and I think had they done that, maybe I didn't learn. Remember, it was 2 weeks after I filed where I learned about the letters, right? So, but the letters were already being received by my school, a week prior. So even my school did a great job. I mean, they received these letters, 9 of them, colleagues and bosses, but they did a great job of keeping that from me. I mean, it was because now in Florida, I don't know if this is all states, but in Florida, the school is required by law to report this. So I think the letters were received probably around the 10th. 9th and I think the 9th and the 10th is what the record stated. And so they would have turned those letters into the sheriff's office immediately, within 24 hours. So yeah, I didn't know, and it was shocking, obviously, to me on that Friday, the 18th, when I learned, how the school, unfortunately, had to be subjected to this, and I felt horrible about it, but it happened.
Yeah, that would be mandatory reporting would be nationwide for people. If you're a doctor or a school teacher, you have to, any signs of abuse, you have to report that immediately. Otherwise, you can get charged with a crime. But I wonder what it was. Did he put his own return address on the envelope? Like, how did they know? Like, if you were like never even a suspect, like how did they know it was him so quickly? Maybe because you're right, he was under some kind of already some kind of surveillance or something, right? Or investigation.
Well, yeah, and again, I don't know the timeline, but I do know that the record is clear that he was under financial investigation back in early 2019, and I guess I could criticize the government, for not arresting him sooner. That would have been nice because you and I wouldn't be talking today. Although you're a nice fellow, it would be nice to have not had to have been subjected to this. Maybe I wouldn't have even run. But then on the other hand, had I not run, these are just questions you wonder, but, would Joel Greenberg have been elected a second and a third term? But I unlikely, he wanted to run against Stephanie Murphy. Matt Gaetz was promoting him to that position. I think I sent you that video earlier. You might feel free to publish that if you want, but, Matt Gaetz was promoting him to run against Stephanie Murphy. So those two were very, very close.
Yeah, you sent me a lot of pictures I haven't seen before, and we'll try and get those up in the Patreon in a free section. Now, what about, since all this is blowing up, have you received any kind of threats or intimidation, political repercussions for this?
No, I ran again I guess maybe I ran again for a separate office this past cycle, but ended up dropping out. I just didn't really have a clear path. I had left the Republican Party. I joined the Forward Party with the idea that it would be a fresh political approach to, serving all citizens and, crossing, the political spectrum divide. But, there was a website that was created using my former BrianBeute.com domain. Could never really prove who created it. And, I think that there was going to be an effort to use that against me. And who knows, I doubt that they would have, gone down the road of, hey, this guy's, raping students. That guy's in jail, in prison. But, that politics is, I hear people make the excuse that you don't ever run for politics because it's so dirty. It doesn't have to be that way, right? And it wouldn't be that way, I think, if regular Americans were more engaged. I think it'd be much more difficult to pull off some of these shenanigans. And shenanigans isn't even the right word. A lot of political crimes, I think, go undiscovered, unreported.
Oh, yeah.
I really do. And I think politicians are partly to blame, or political candidates are partly to blame too. Often when you see something come out, or the hint of something kind of coming out, or maybe a threat behind closed doors, you'll see candidates just back out of nowhere, and I didn't do that. I thought it was really imperative that I continued that race in 2020.
I almost wonder if they were trying to preempt, because he had so many allegations against him about the underage malfeasance there. That there was like a preemptive attack, that you wouldn't bring that up about him, But who knows? It's just such a wild story. So what did you think when you first saw Gaetz being put up there for Attorney General? You said, "Oh my God, not again!" What would you think of there?
Well, I've made a statement. I put out a video not too long ago that I don't believe he's qualified to serve anyone. I don't believe he's qualified to serve us. Number one. Number two, I don't believe that we want a person like that attached to government at all. If he wants to join the rest of us, lay people and, create a business, or, I don't know, maybe try a case, great. But I don't believe that he's the moral character that we want. And this is just my beliefs, right? And I don't think I'm alone. And it's not an attack on the guy. I've never met the guy. I've been asked before if I met him. No, I was in Seminole County, obviously, but I didn't hang around in those circles. And And I think that's my point. I don't think the American people understand how much time he spent with Joel Greenberg in Seminole County. It wasn't a casual relationship, right? And it's been proven by the receipts and the amount of money spent. And he admits, what's his statement? Something like, I admit in my 30s. Well, here's the thing. In 2017, Matt Gaetz was 36 years old. I'm sorry, but most men are grown up well before 36 years old and not spending time with the likes of Joel Greenberg's. Really.
Yeah, and like you said, he's never tried a case. He's never prosecuted a single case in his life. But, he got a DUI. In the old days, that would have been enough, But then also, too, he tried to get on a plane twice carrying a gun on two different occasions. Like, this guy's he's a crime maker, not a crime fighter.
Some could argue and say that he learned from Joel Greenberg, or maybe some others could argue and say, well, actually, Joel Greenberg learned from him. So they were inseparable, all right? And I think that the public needs to understand that. I don't care what Molly Hemingway or Village Crazy Lady or Candace Owens, Dory, Glenn Beck, Charlie Kirk say. These two people were inseparable, and there were others, obviously. But since these are the two that we're talking about today, I don't believe that Matt Gaetz, I believe he's no longer qualified. He's disqualified himself from running for anything again or being nominated or being anywhere associated with our government. We can do better.
Yeah, he should be on Dancing with the Stars at this point. But the thing is, also, to one of their more sleazy activities is because Greenberg was in charge of the Department of Motor Vehicles, the tax office here, where you go in there with your old license from another state or something like that. They take it and they put it in a box to be shred later. We're going to get around to shredding these all at once at the big shredding machine. And they were going in there in the middle of the night, looking through them to find girls that look like the girls they dated, so for fake IDs, they could take them to bars and drink.
Well, here's my question for you, Ed. Did that actually happen? Because we haven't seen any of the closed circuit videos that apparently exist. So again, that I asked the question in the media, well, why are you not requesting this?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there are, in this case, there are still unanswered questions. And I don't know if Matt Gaetz has been asked about that evening. I think he had, and I can't remember his answer. But, instead of going down the road of claiming he did this or that, why doesn't the media just simply point, here's what he actually did, and then ask him follow-up questions, and don't give up until you get the answer? But, our media, of course, is so divided, purposely divided, that, I'm not surprised if the American people don't know what to believe. And I think that's purposeful. I think that's the grand operation to distract us and then to divide us. And, man, take a look out in your neighborhoods. Have you noticed that we're pretty divided people? We don't trust each other anymore. It's those are the things I care about ultimately. I really try to get out of my own shoes and try to think more globally, universally. What can we as regular people do to participate positively so that our nation doesn't become, a despot culture if we're not there already. And I just think that the American people we are much better. I'm tired of the narrative that we're not. I don't know about you. I've got great neighbors, that are caring and when political seasons come around, you know what? They talk to each other. They do. And the media will say otherwise. I don't believe that's the case.
Well, maybe, people will get sick and tired of saying, hey, I can't go to Thanksgiving dinner with my, distant relatives because it's too polarizing. Maybe we'll be tired of living that way someday. We'll just say, hey, let's put our own differences aside and realize.
Maybe.
Yeah, I know. You think, right? Mr. Brian A. Beute, we only got about a minute left. What do you want to leave us with?
I'm sorry?
We only have about 1 minute left. What would you like to leave us with?
Well, I think we've covered it. Great questions, Ed. I appreciate it. I'd like to see you and the media address, my two objectives, and obviously to reiterate those two objectives, it'd be great to know the unindicted co-conspirator in my case. I already stated which document numbers you can find and which document number you cannot find. And of course, this false narrative that, that Matt Gaetz, was not Joel Greenberg. And frankly, I think Joel was scapegoated by a lot of people. He allowed it. He is a criminal. Clearly, he's paying the price. But I think a lot of people are scapegoating him. And I said this, by the way, even way back when I was interviewed by the Rolling Stone and New York Times, or not the New York Times, the Washington Times and the Washington Post. I do believe there are people who used Joel. And some of those people did pay the price. Some of those people are in prison. One man died, is deceased since. So it's
who's the man? Real quick, who's the guy that died?
Central Florida.
Who died?
That was James Adamczyk.
Okay. And what was the cause of death?
Yeah.
What was
I believe he was fighting cancer.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe he was fighting cancer. Yeah.
Brian A. Beute, thank you so much. If you want to get a hold of Brian, on his LinkedIn page, Brian A. Beute, B-E-U-T-E. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed. Have a great day.
You too. Good night.